Joel Klatt is with us now. Fox Sports at Joel Klatt on Twitter, host of the Joel Klatt Show, as you might have imagined by the name of that program. He is with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. What is up, Klatt? How are you today?
I'm good. How are you guys? What's going on?
Not a whole lot, man. We're doing awesome. I tell you what, in the first quarter of that game last night, I thought this is going to be a bloodbath. It may not be Georgia TCU level, but Washington has no answer for the run. The fact that this was even a game in the second half was pretty remarkable.
Washington's adjustment. And then I thought actually, Michigan got away from what was being successful.
Yeah.
They had those extra offensive linemen in the game, and they were playing big. Washington couldn't handle them when they were playing big and increasing the number of gaps in particular and trying to get on the edge and running that duo play, which was really big for them. And then they started getting into like more of a spread mode, almost like they wanted to feature J.J. McCarthy. And I'm like, hold on. This offense is way better when they're not featuring J.J. McCarthy, and he's a byproduct of what they're able to do. And so, their game plan and what they went away from kind of allowed Washington to adjust, settle down. Then their defense started playing better. And, at that point, when Washington scores before half, in my head, I'm like, Washington's winning the game. They're going to come out. They have the rhythm. They're going to go out there and score to begin the second half. And then the interception, guys, that was really the first moment where I was like, oh, wow, Michigan might hold them. And then they did. That was a tremendous defensive performance from Jesse Minter, the coordinator, from the players. And once again, and you guys know this to be tried and true, and all the fans down there are going to know this as well. The best defensive line wins the national championship, generally speaking. Now, if you get an ungodly quarterback performance like Burrow, maybe you can overcome a defense that's not great. But generally speaking, the rule of thumb since the BCS started is that you've got to have at least a top 30 defense, really more like a top 15 defense in order to win the national championship. And that's remains true here this year.
Klatt, back to your point, with 4:46 left in the first half, I thought the game was going to swing on this moment. I mean, Michigan in the first quarter averaged over 19 yards per rush, and they're sitting there with a fourth and like 2.5 on the 38 of Washington. They call the timeout, they come back out, and they let JJ throw the football. And I'm like, what in the hell are you doing? Like, I liked them going for it there, but if they go down and make that 24-3, game's over. Instead, it flips. Penix goes down, 17-10, like you said, getting ball. I'm like you. I was like, damn, this thing has gotten away from Michigan.
Yeah, and by the way, I think it was the previous series, they had a third down in the red zone and threw a similar route. It was like a flat route, out route, if you will. Same thing happened. It got batted down, and I'm like, well, one, it's a low percentage throw. And like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, if you want to throw it, fine, but like no heavy run action, like, no counter action, no pulling. That was a mystery to me. I have no idea. I've seen them, guys, I've called 16 of their games since the start of 21. 16.
Wow.
I cannot tell you how many short yardage situations where it's third down or fourth down, inside of 3 yards, they run the wedge dive and just get it. Wedge dive, get it. And their guards just push people, 4 yards down the field. And it didn't matter who they were playing. They did it against Alabama on a couple of short yardage plays. And they didn't do it against Washington? That was shocking. I thought that was a total miss from them and allowed Washington to get back into the game, but their defense bailed them out.
Absolutely. My love for Southern college football comes from my pawpaw, my grandfather, and my dad, James Sr., but even my dad, who's still living, had to say last night how much he loved that style of football. It's ironic to me that you've got to go back to 2020 Alabama to see a spread-like team win the national championship, because Georgia did it like you talked about with defense and just a manageable offensive running and passing short passes. They did it in 21, 22, and now Michigan has done it in 2023. For the old school football people, they got to love the last 3 national champions.
Well, and it's yes, it's tried and true, and yes, it's old school. I think all of those things are true, but I think that the defensive philosophy really shifted. Late in the 2000s, when you had those high-flying offenses, you had those shootout national championships between Clemson and Alabama, and even Nick was adjusting on the offensive side. Here's what ended up happening is in order to defend the RPO, which was more of the early 2011, 12, 13. I think that's really when it became prevalent. Before that it was zone read, and then it became the RPO. And to defend the RPO, defenses started taking bigger risks because they felt like playing zone allowed the offense to really zero in on what I would consider to be a movement key or a conflict defender. And the RPO just killed the conflict defender. So zone was out. And defenses were like, well, we better man up. Well, what you saw was an explosion of offense because it was big plays galore, and you've got quick strike offenses. And remember, for about 5-6 years, it was in vogue to be like, how fast can you go? How quick can you score? And a lot of that was born out of the fact that the defenses were having to play riskier defensive structures, and they were having to play at a super high tempo. So then now let's go to like 2019, 20, and 21. Now defensive coaches get back in the room and they're like, crap, they're scratching their head and they're like, well, what are we going to do? And then they're like, well, who are the best defenses of that era? Like the spread high tempo, hyper tempo. Iowa, Bama to some degree. Northwestern played some great defense. Kansas State played some really good defense. And I'm talking about defenses that could do it without 5 stars littered all over the place. And there were some common themes. While the structures were different, and I'm sorry this is a long answer, but this is really what happened, the evolution of defense. And here's what you got to. Whether you were going to play an odd man front or an even man front didn't really matter. What you had to do was maintain your levels, get hybrid players at the second and third levels in the interior of the field, and limit the explosive plays. You had to. So you went back to zone defense, and you just said, you know what? Rather than allowing some quarterback to snap it 3 or 4 times to go down the field and score like that, we're just going to force them to snap it 8, 9, 10 times, maybe 11 or 12 times, and we're going to bank on the fact that someone on that team is going to make a mistake, whether it's a bad route, a drop pass, a false start. And defenses just started putting the pressure back on the offenses to execute. So now what you see of the last few years is let's get really good on the defensive line, maintain levels of football, limit the explosive plays, put the pressure back on the offense just to execute in order to score. Fine, you can score, but it's going to take you 10 plays, and we're going to do our damnedest to tackle well, line up properly, all these basic things, and that's what you see. Now, it just so happens in order to win at the top level, using that type of philosophy, you've got to be great on the interior of your defensive line. And I would argue the last 3 national champions had college football's best group of defensive tackles. And that's what college football is now, and that's what the evolution of the sport defensively has been in the last 15 years.
Wow, very well done.
Yeah, I mean, they were a textbook tackling team.
Yeah, no doubt.
They don't miss tackles.
No, they don't. Yeah, Sanders still made one out in the flat, and Herbie even pointed out a Fowler one that, he missed that tackle 4 times against Alabama, and that was very unlike him.
Boy, he was all over the place last night.
He's a player. Joel Klatt is with us, courtesy of mybookie.ag, code next round when you sign on to get that bonus. When you use code next round, bet anything, anytime, anywhere at mybookie.ag. However you answer this question will be an overreaction, but I'm going to ask anyway. Mm-hmm. A fan overreaction. If I'm a Washington fan and I watched that game last night with the best team I've had in decades, do I think I've got what it takes to play in the Big Ten, or do I look at that and say I've still got some work to do?
Probably a bit of both, because a lot of those players are walking out the door. I think it has more to do with that than anything. I made this point on the show I released earlier today. Shameless plug here. You guys can go check it out. My reaction, Joel Klatt show. But I made this point. I thought last night, and you guys might roll your eyes at this, but whatever. I thought last night gave more hope to college football than college football writ large has had in over a decade. For over a decade, it was you had to, no ifs, ands, or buts, average in the top 4 in recruiting classes over a 4-year span in order to win the national championship. You had to be a top 3 or 4 composite talent team to win the national championship. The gap between even national championship game participants was huge. Now, last year notwithstanding, okay? No, I'm thinking more about like the Bama Notre Dame games, or even some of those semifinals when we had like Bama Michigan State, or when we had Clemson Oklahoma when they were destroying them, when we had LSU Oklahoma. Like the gap between even the top teams in college football was massive. And what you've got over the last 2 years is, I think, a squeezing because of the ability of the player to move around and the agency of the player to move around. I think we've got talent dispersing. Now, last night, we saw 2 teams that weren't in the top 10 in talent composite, that haven't averaged a top 4 recruiting class, and they were easily deserving to be there. Any of the 4 teams could have won the college football playoff. And now you've got a team that wins the national championship that in the last 4 years averaged a recruiting class that was outside of the top 10. You've got a talent composite that was 14, while high, certainly not in the top 5, and a team that won the national championship with only 2 5-star players on their roster. I know you asked a specific question about Washington, but when you talk about hope for the future, how many teams now can look out and say, well, wait, we can do that. We can develop. We can target players. We can target culture. We can get the right 5 stars in the right spot. And we can go and win a national championship because it was just proven that you can do that. And by the way, it's not like they had some sort of easy path. I get it. They didn't play Georgia, but Georgia lost to Alabama. Sorry. That's kind of the way that it goes. And then they beat Alabama. They beat Washington. They beat Ohio State. They beat Penn State. All after the sign stealing story breaks, after the suspension. They have 4 top 10 wins. And now the rest of college football can sit there and they can say, why can't we do that? Why can't we target a year? Even Washington's run to the national championship, TCU's run to the national championship. Think of how many teams now around the country have legitimate hope where they did not have legitimate hope 10 years ago. They just didn't. And now they do. I'm thinking about teams like A&M and Ole Miss. Maybe even Tennessee falls into that. Maybe Michigan State strikes gold with Jonathan Smith. Maybe Oregon can actually do it. Utah can actually do it. Arizona can actually do it. There are a lot of teams now that think that they can go and win the national championship.
Excellent thoughts on just overall college football there from Joel Klatt. It has been fun all season. Next time we talk to Klatt, it'll be draft related a little bit later on. But this is our last visit for a little while. Klatt, it is always fun. We've enjoyed it.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. And I hope you guys have a great month or so before we start getting into the draft. This one should be a good one. This is going to be a great draft.
Yeah.
Did you see Max Homa drive? I know you love golf. Did you see his 470?
Yeah, what did he hit, like a 477-yard drive or something?
Yeah. You got a 477-yard drive in you?
I don't. I don't. I have played that course, and what they do to that course is silly. If anyone has played Kapalua, the plantation course, they're like, oh, it's a birdie fest out here. No, it's not.
Yeah.
Not for mortals. It's not at all. It's a huge golf course.
Oh, it's the easiest course they play on tour, and you go out there and you're like, my gosh, this place is hard.
Legitimately, and I'm not saying this to like brag. I shot a 76 and played out of my mind.
I know. Yeah, I know.
And I'm a scratch player, and they're shooting. They're like, well, I only shot 68.
Yeah. Hey, can you just so you know what LT and I have to put up with, I brought that stat up yesterday about the 477-yard drive, and Brown started lecturing us on it's slightly downhill,
not slightly,
wind at your back,
hard fairways.
And he is our golf snob.
I was like, it's 477.
There was no lecture. I was just pointing out that everybody hits it long there.
Yeah.
You basically, that was the on-air equivalent of a fact check.
Yeah. Well, I have to do that Dunaway.
477 is 477.
Yeah,
asterisk or no asterisk, it's 477.
There was no asterisk. I was just pointing out that is very beneficial, as Klatt said.
I mean, how far did Roy McAvoy's 7-iron go down the road? Would you say like, hey, he had his 7-iron 500 yards? Wouldn't you need the fact that he hit it down the highway?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, he won the bet, right?
I do think
He won the bet.
Yeah.
Drove away with, no, it wasn't McAvoy. It was Oh gosh.
Yeah, the other guy.
Why am I?
Don Johnson.
Who's the other way? It's not. Was it Shooter McGavin?
I think that's
Yeah,
it.
Shooter McGavin did it.
No, that's Happy Gilmore.
Yeah.
Right. Who's
It was the Don Johnson character, right?
David something?
I can't remember.
Gosh,
I don't
that's
know.
going to drive me nuts for the rest of the day.
You can,
David Sims.
there you go, David Sims.
There
That'll
it
work.
is.
Good pull.
All right, Klatt, thank you. Always
Well,
fun,
hell,
buddy.
Roy, it's never even crossed my mind to try. All right, sorry. Go ahead.
See you,
You're
buddy.
outta
Thank you. Klatt with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. He's presented each week with us by MyBookie.ag. Sign on right now with code NEXTROUND and get that sign-on bonus. You could use it right away. MyBookie.ag. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag.